The door to the Duchess's chambers stood open, empty. No argument, no scandal, no lovers, just silence and a woman who had finally stopped waiting. For 10 years, Lady Alara Vance had been the perfect wife to a man who never saw her. Now, while Duke Rowan Hale stood frozen in the doorway, she folded the last of her things into a single trunk with hands that didn't shake. This wasn't rage. It was something far more dangerous, clarity. And for the first time in a decade, the Duke understood what he'd spent all those years destroying. If you want to see how far silence can break two people and whether anything can pull them back, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see just how far this story travels. The estate had always been cold. Not the kind of cold that came from weather, though the northern moors brought plenty of that, but the kind that seeped into the bones from years of careful distance. Blackthorn Estate was a monument to restraint. Every stone placed with precision, every corridor designed to impress, every room a reminder that the Hale family had stood here for 2 centuries, unshaken. Alara had learned early on that the house didn't care about warmth. She stood now in the bedroom she'd occupied alone for the last 8 years, folding a wool shawl with the same methodical calm she'd perfected over the course of her marriage. The trunk at her feet was nearly full. Not much to show for a decade, really. A few gowns, books she'd read in silence, a silver hairbrush that had belonged to her mother. The rest, the jewels, the furs, the ridiculous parade of gifts meant to substitute for conversation, she was leaving behind. "You're really doing this?" Rowan's voice came from the doorway. Not a question, not quite a statement either, just words dropped into the space between them like stones into a well, waiting to see if they'd hit bottom. Alara didn't turn around. "Yes," without even telling me why. Would it have mattered? That hung there for a moment. She heard him shift his weight, the floorboards creaking under his boots. He'd probably come straight from the stables. She could smell the faint tang of leather and horse. He always smelled like that, like the outdoors, like a man who spent more time with his animals than his wife. "Alara, don't." She said it quietly, but the word landed hard. She placed the shawl in the trunk and finally looked at him. He looked the same as always. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just slightly too long across his forehead. Handsome in that effortless way some men were, the kind that made servants blush and society matrons whisper. He wore his authority like a second skin, every inch the Duke, even standing there in riding clothes with mud on his boots. But his eyes, those pale gray eyes that had once made her heart stutter, were confused, lost even. "Good. I'm not doing this to hurt you," she said. "I'm doing this because I can't stay. Can't or won't. Does it matter?" He stepped into the room, and she noticed the way his hands flexed at his sides. Not threatening, just restless, like he didn't know what to do with them. "We've been married 10 years. I know. There's been no scandal, no public." "No," she agreed. "Nothing public, just nothing at all." His jaw tightened. "That's not fair, isn't it?" She turned back to the trunk, folding a nightgown with hands that had stopped trembling years ago. "When was the last time we ate dinner together, Rowan? Not at some formal event, just the two of us." Silence. "When was the last time you asked me how I was? Not as a pleasantry in passing, actually asked." More silence. "When was the last time—" Her voice caught, just barely, and she hated herself for it. She pressed her lips together and focused on the fabric in her hands. "When was the last time you looked at me and saw a person instead of a piece of furniture?" "That's not—" He stopped, started again. "I never thought of you that way." "No, you didn't think of me at all." She heard him take a breath, the kind men took when they were trying very hard not to lose their temper. She'd heard it before, usually right before he left the room. "Where will you go?" "North." "North where? Does it matter?" "For God's sake, Alara." He bit off whatever he'd been about to say. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, controlled. "You're my wife. People will talk. Let them. Your reputation is already ruined." She closed the trunk and straightened, meeting his eyes. "I've been married to you for 10 years, Rowan. 10 years of separate bedrooms and silent breakfasts and polite nods at parties. Everyone already knows this marriage is a mausoleum. I'm just finally admitting it." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or anger. It was hard to tell. He'd always been so damn good at keeping everything locked down. I never wanted... He stopped, shook his head. I thought we had an understanding. We did. You understood that I would be quiet and decorative and never ask for more than you were willing to give, and I understood that you would never give me anything that mattered. That's not true. Isn't it? She crossed her arms, suddenly exhausted. Name one thing you know about me, Rowan. One real thing. Not what I look like in a ball gown or how I take my tea. Something that actually matters. He stared at her. She watched him struggle, saw the way his brow furrowed as he searched for an answer that wouldn't come. You can't, she said softly, because you never asked. You never cared enough to ask. His hands clenched into fists. I provided for you, protected you, gave you everything a duchess could want, except a husband. The words fell between them like a blade. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Outside, she could hear the wind picking up, rattling the window panes. A storm coming in, fitting. What do you want from me? His voice was rough now, stripped of that careful control. Do you want me to beg? Apologize? Tell you I'll change? No. And she meant it. I don't want anything from you anymore, Rowan. That's the point. She could see it land, could see the exact moment he understood that this wasn't a negotiation or a bid for attention. This was an ending. The carriage is waiting, she said. I'll send for the rest of my things once I'm settled. You can't just... He stopped himself, ran a hand through his hair in a gesture that was almost vulnerable. Elara, please. It was the please that nearly broke her. She'd waited 10 years to hear that word from him. 10 years of hoping he'd notice her, need her, want her for something more than the title she carried and the bloodline she could provide. And now, when it finally came, it was too late. Goodbye, Rowan. She picked up her cloak from the chair and draped it over her shoulders. The trunk would be brought down by the servants. She'd arranged it all days ago, quietly, without fuss. No drama, no spectacle. Just a woman making a choice. She walked past him toward the door. His hand shot out, catching her wrist. Not hard, not cruel, just desperate. Don't. She looked down at his hand, then up at his face. For the first time in years, she saw something real there, something raw and unguarded. Fear. Let go, she said quietly. I can't. You have to. For a heartbeat, she thought he might actually hold on, might actually fight. But then his fingers loosened, fell away, and she was free. She didn't look back as she walked down the corridor, didn't let herself pause at the top of the grand staircase where she'd stood on their wedding day, young and hopeful and stupidly in love with a man who'd barely spoken to her during the ceremony. Didn't let herself remember the way she'd imagined their life would be, full of laughter and warmth and all the things the poets wrote about. The house was silent as she descended. The servants had made themselves scarce. They always knew when to disappear. Only Mrs. Brennan, the housekeeper, stood waiting at the bottom of the stairs with her cloak already fastened and a small bag in her hands. The carriage is ready, my lady. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. The older woman's eyes were kind but sad. If I may say, you've been the best of us here. I hope you find what you're looking for. Elara managed to smile. I'm not looking for anything. That's the point. The cold hit her the moment she stepped outside. Late autumn in the north was brutal, the kind of cold that made your lungs ache and your eyes water. But Elara welcomed it. After 10 years of suffocating stillness, the bite of the wind felt like waking up. The carriage waited in the circular drive, horses stamping and snorting in the cold. The driver touched his hat as she approached. Ready when you are, my lady. She climbed in without assistance, settled onto the worn leather seat, and wrapped her cloak tighter around herself. Through the window, she could see Blackthorn Estate rising behind her, all those cold stones and empty rooms and years of careful silence. The carriage lurched into motion. She didn't look back. Yet, Rowan stood in the doorway of her chambers for what might have been minutes or hours. Time felt strange, elastic, like something had come loose in the machinery of the world. The room still smelled like her, lavender and something else, something he'd never been able to name. He'd walked past this door 1,000 times and never once stopped to wonder what she did in here, what she thought about, whether she was happy. The truth was, he thought she was fine, content even. She'd never complained, never made demands, never thrown the kind of tantrums he'd seen other wives indulge in when they wanted attention or jewels or whatever it was women wanted. Alara had been easy, undemanding, the perfect duchess, and he'd mistaken that for satisfaction instead of resignation. "Your Grace?" He turned to find Garrett, his steward, hovering in the corridor. The man looked uncomfortable, which made sense, given that the entire household had just witnessed the Duchess of Blackthorn calmly walking out the front door with a single trunk and no explanation. "What?" The staff wanted to know if, that is, should we spit it out, Garrett? Should we prepare the Duchess's chambers for her return, or the word hung there like a noose. "Leave them," Rowan said finally. "She'll want her things when she sends for them." "Of course, Your Grace." Garrett paused. "If I may, is there anything else you need?" What he needed was for the last hour to unhappen. What he needed was to go back 10 years and be less of a coward. What he needed was to understand why his chest felt like someone had reached in and scooped out everything vital. "No, that's all." Garrett withdrew with obvious relief. Rowan walked into Alara's room and sat on the edge of her bed. The mattress was softer than his. She'd always complained about backaches, though never loudly enough for him to actually do anything about it. There were books on the nightstand. He picked one up. Poetry. Byron. He'd never known she read poetry. What else didn't he know? He set the book down and looked around the room with new eyes. Watercolors on the wall, landscapes mostly. The northern coast. Had she painted those? He'd never asked. A sewing basket in the corner, thread spilling out in a dozen colors. She'd embroidered all the napkins in the dining room, he realized suddenly. Every single one. When had she done that? Who was she? The question made him feel sick. 10 years. They'd been married 10 years, and he couldn't answer the most basic questions about his own wife. What made her laugh? What frightened her? What did she dream about? He treated her like a ghost, and she'd finally accepted the role by disappearing. There was a knock at the door. "What?" he snapped. Mrs. Brennan stepped in, her face carefully neutral. "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but there's something you should know. If this is about the Duchess, it is." She clasped her hands in front of her. "She's been planning this for months, sir. Since summer, at least. She inquired about properties in the north, made arrangements for funds to be transferred. The housekeeper hesitated. She was very thorough. Months. She'd been planning to leave him for months, and he hadn't noticed. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know it wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a tantrum or a moment of upset. She thought about it, long and hard, and she decided you weren't worth staying for." The words hit like a fist. "That's impertinent, Mrs. Brennan." "Yes, Your Grace, it is." She didn't look remotely apologetic. But someone needed to say it. She left before he could respond. Rowan sat there in his wife's empty room, surrounded by all the small pieces of a life he'd never bothered to see, and felt something crack open in his chest. She was right. All of it. Every word she'd said. He'd taken her for granted, assumed she'd always be there, quiet and uncomplaining, asking for nothing because he'd made it clear he had nothing to give. He'd built walls around himself so high and so thick that he'd forgotten there was supposed to be someone on the other side. And now she was gone. The storm hit that night with the kind of violence that made the whole estate shudder. Wind screamed through the eaves. Rain lashed the windows. Rowan stood in his study because he couldn't bear to go to bed, couldn't bear the thought of lying there alone while Alara was out in this, somewhere on the road to wherever the hell she'd decided was better than here, and stared at the fire. He'd always prided himself on control, on discipline, on keeping everything in its proper place. But control, he was realizing, was just another word for cowardice. He'd kept Alara at arm's length because getting closer meant risk, meant vulnerability, meant the possibility of being hurt or disappointed or not enough. And so he'd chosen safety, chosen silence, chosen wrong. The fire crackled. Outside, something crashed. A tree branch, probably, torn loose by the wind. He thought about the way she'd looked at him before she left. Not angry, not even sad. Just done. That was worse than anything. If she'd been angry, he could have fought with her. If she'd been sad, he could have comforted her. But done? Done meant she'd already mourned the marriage, already let go, already moved on while he was still standing here like an idiot, trying to figure out when everything had gone to hell. The answer, of course, was simple. It had always been hell. He'd just been too blind, or too stubborn, to see it. Alara reached the cottage 3 days later. It was smaller than she'd expected, rougher. The roof needed patching, and the windows rattled in their frames, and there was a persistent draft that no amount of banking the fire seemed to fix. But it was hers. Bought with money she'd carefully saved from her allowance over the years. Money Rowan had never questioned because he'd never paid attention to anything she did. The village was 2 miles away, close enough to buy supplies, far enough to avoid constant scrutiny. The locals knew she was a widow from the south, a lie but a useful one, seeking solitude after her husband's death, also a lie, but closer to the truth than they'd ever know. They left her alone. It was exactly what she wanted. The first week was hard, not because she missed Blackthorn, she didn't, not even a little, but because she'd forgotten what it was like to make decisions. Real decisions. What to eat, when to sleep, how to spend her days. For 10 years, her life had been a series of obligations and expectations. Now, with all of that stripped away, she felt oddly weightless. Lost, maybe, but also free. She started small, learning to cook more than the basic dishes she'd picked up from sneaking into the kitchens as a girl. Chopping wood for the fire, mending the roof with the help of a local man who asked no questions and accepted her coins with a grunt. She read books she'd never had time for, walked the moors until her legs ached and her lungs burned. She cried, sometimes. Late at night, when the wind howled and the cottage felt too small and too empty all at once. She cried for the girl she'd been, the one who'd believed marriage meant partnership. She cried for the years she'd wasted waiting for a man to notice her. But she didn't cry for Rowan. He didn't deserve her tears. What? Back at Blackthorn, Rowan was drowning. It started slowly. Little things. He'd go to speak to Alara about some household matter before remembering she wasn't there. He'd find himself setting 2 places at dinner before the servants quietly removed one. He'd walk past her chambers and expect to see light under the door. But the light never came. The house felt different without her. Emptier, yes, but also colder. Like she'd been the only source of warmth, and now that she was gone, the whole place had frozen over. The servants noticed. They didn't say anything. They were far too well trained for that, but he could see it in the way they looked at him. Pity, mostly. And something else. Disapproval. They'd liked her, he realized. Alara had been kind to them, patient. She'd known their names, their families, their troubles. And he'd never once acknowledged it. Society noticed, too. Within a week, the whispers started. The Duchess of Blackthorn had left. No one knew where. Some said she'd run off with a lover. Absurd, but salacious enough to spread. Others claimed she'd gone mad. Equally absurd, but more palatable to the sensibilities of the ton. A few suggested she'd simply grown tired of her cold, distant husband. Those were the ones that stung, because they were true. Rowan attended a dinner at Lord Pemberton's estate 2 weeks after Alara left, and quickly realized it was a mistake. The room went quiet when he entered. Conversations stuttered and died. Women whispered behind fans. Lady Pemberton, never one for subtlety, cornered him within minutes. "Rowan, darling, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine." "Of course you are." She sipped her wine, eyes glittering. "Such a shame about Alara, though I can't say I'm entirely surprised." His jaw tightened. "No?" "Well, you were never exactly attentive, were you? A woman like that, young, beautiful, trapped in that dreary estate with a husband who barely spoke to her. It's a wonder she lasted as long as she did." He wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but what could he say? She was right. "If you'll excuse me." "Oh, don't sulk, darling. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You had a good thing, and you took it for granted. Now you're paying the price." He left the dinner early, rode back to Blackthorn through a freezing rain that soaked him to the bone, stood in the entrance hall, dripping water onto the marble floor, and wondered when his life had become unrecognizable. Garrett found him there an hour later, still in his wet clothes. "Your Grace, you'll catch your death." "Would that be so terrible?" The steward blinked. "I beg your pardon?" Rowan shook his head. Nothing. Is there something you need? A letter arrived from the Duchess. His heart lurched. What does it say? I didn't read it, Your Grace. It's sealed. He took the letter with hands that shook slightly. Alara's handwriting, neat, precise, elegant. He broke the seal. Rowan, I'm writing to request that my remaining belongings be sent to the following address. I've enclosed a list. Please have them packed carefully and shipped at your earliest convenience. I trust this arrangement is acceptable. E. Vance. That was it. No explanation, no emotion, just logistics, and she'd signed it with her maiden name. He read it 3 times, searching for something, anything, that suggested she still cared. But there was nothing. Just cold, polite efficiency. She'd erased him. He sat down at his desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, started to write a response, stopped, started again. What could he possibly say? I'm sorry felt inadequate. Come back felt selfish. I love you felt like a lie. Because how could he claim to love someone he'd never actually known? In the end, he wrote nothing. He sent her things as requested. Every gown, every book, every small piece of her life that she'd left behind. He packed them himself, ignoring Garrett's protests because he needed to touch these pieces of her one last time. When it was done, when the trunks were loaded and sent north, he stood in her empty chambers and felt the full weight of what he'd lost. Not a wife. A person. Someone who'd trusted him enough to build a life with him and who he'd repaid with indifference. The realization didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, over weeks and months. Every time he ate dinner alone. Every time he walked past her chambers and remembered the lavender smell. Every time someone mentioned her name and he saw the judgment in their eyes. He'd failed her, completely, utterly, unforgivably. And now she was gone. And he had no idea how to fix it, or if it could even be fixed. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't leave it like this. He couldn't let her spend the rest of her life thinking she'd meant nothing to him, that their marriage had been nothing but a burden she'd finally shed. Because the truth he was only now beginning to understand, was that she'd been the only real thing in his carefully controlled life. And he'd been too much of a coward to see it. The decision came to him one night in early winter. He was sitting in his study, staring at the fire, when Mrs. Brennan knocked. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but you have a visitor. Tell them I'm not receiving. It's Lord Calloway, sir. He says it's urgent. Rowan sighed. Calloway was an old friend, one of the few who hadn't treated him like a pariah since Alara left. Fine, send him in. Send. Calloway swept in moments later, snow dusting his shoulders. Christ, Rowan, you look like hell. Good to see you too. I'm serious. When was the last time you slept, or ate, or did anything besides sit in this tomb and feel sorry for yourself? I'm not. Yes, you are. And honestly, you should be. Calloway dropped into a chair. What you did to that girl was unconscionable. I didn't do anything to her, that's the problem. Exactly. Calloway leaned forward. So fix it. It's not that simple. Isn't it? You know where she is? Go to her, apologize, grovel if you have to. Make it right. She doesn't want to see me. Then make her. Calloway's eyes were hard. Rowan, I've known you since we were boys. You're a lot of things. Stubborn, proud, occasionally an insufferable ass. But you're not a coward. Don't start now. What if it's too late? Then at least you'll know you tried. The words sat with him long after Calloway left. What if it was too late? What if she'd moved on, found happiness, built a life that didn't include him? The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it felt like a knife between the ribs. He didn't sleep that night, or the next. He spent hours pacing, thinking, planning. And then, on the third night, he made his decision. He called for Garrett at dawn. I need you to draw up documents, transferring full ownership of the Pemberton properties to the Duchess, along with access to the Blackthorn funds. Everything. Garrett stared at him. Your Grace, those properties are part of the family estate. They've been, I don't care. Do it. But the solicitors will need to, then get them. I want it done within the week. May I ask why? Rowan met his eyes. Because she deserves the freedom to choose. And I've spent 10 years taking that choice away from her. I won't make that mistake again. Understanding dawned on Garrett's face. Very good, Your Grace. It took 9 days. 9 days of paperwork and solicitors and arguments with his man of business, who insisted this was financial suicide. 9 days of second-guessing and doubt and wondering if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. But when the documents were finally signed, when everything was legal and binding and irrevocable, Rowan felt something he hadn't felt in months. Purpose. He left for the north the next morning, the documents safely tucked in his coat. He had no idea what he'd say to her. No plan beyond showing up and putting his entire life in her hands. It was, he realized as the carriage rolled through the winter landscape, the first truly honest thing he'd done in years. And if she sent him away, then at least he'd know he'd tried. The northern roads were hell in winter. Rowan had forgotten that, or maybe he'd never really known it. His trips north had always been brief, comfortable, insulated by wealth and warm carriages and servants who handled the inconvenient details. But this journey stripped all of that away. The wind cut through his coat like knives. Ice made the roads treacherous. Twice the carriage got stuck in drifts deep enough to swallow the wheels, and he'd had to climb down and help the driver dig them out, his hands going numb even through leather gloves. Good, he thought grimly as he shoved another chunk of frozen mud aside. He deserved worse. The driver, a stoic man named Hamish who'd worked for the Hale family for 20 years, didn't ask questions about why the Duke of Blackthorn was personally hauling his own carriage out of snowbanks. He just worked silently beside Rowan, occasionally grunting instructions, and accepted the strange turn of events with the kind of resignation that came from decades of aristocratic eccentricity. They stopped at an inn on the fourth night. The place was rough, smoky, filled with locals who went quiet when Rowan walked in. He was too well dressed, too obviously out of place. The innkeeper eyed him with open suspicion. Need a room. How many nights? 1, maybe 2. The man named a price that was probably triple the going rate. Rowan paid without argument and took his key. The room was small, cold, and smelled vaguely of mildew. The bed creaked when he sat on it. Through the thin walls, he could hear someone coughing, the rhythmic creak of bed springs, a woman's muffled laughter. He pulled the documents from his coat and spread them on the narrow table by the window. Transfer of property. Access to funds. Full legal independence. Everything she'd need to never think about him again. His solicitor had called it insanity. You're giving her the power to destroy you, Your Grace. She could take everything and disappear, remarry, cut you off entirely. I know. Then why? Because it's hers. It should have always been hers. The solicitor had looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. Rowan folded the documents carefully and tucked them back into his coat. Outside, snow was falling again, thick and relentless. Somewhere out there, beyond the storm and the darkness, Alara was living a life he knew nothing about. The thought kept him awake most of the night. They reached the village the next afternoon. It was smaller than he'd expected. A handful of stone buildings clustered around a frozen stream, smoke rising from chimneys, a church at one end and a sad-looking tavern at the other. The kind of place people came to disappear. Wait here, he told Hamish. Your Grace. I don't know how long I'll be. Hamish gave him a long look. If you're not back by dark, I'm coming to find you. Fair enough. The village had a general store that doubled as a post office. Rowan pushed through the door, snow falling from his shoulders, and was immediately hit by the smell of dried herbs and tobacco and something baking in a back room. The woman behind the counter looked up. She was middle-aged, sharp-eyed, with flour dusting her apron. Help you? I'm looking for someone. A woman who moved here a few months ago, from the south, living alone. Her expression shuddered immediately. Don't know what you're talking about. I'm not here to cause trouble. That's what they all say. She crossed her arms. We don't give out information about residents. Privacy's important up here. He should have expected this. Should have known that Alara would have earned the loyalty of these people. She had that effect, he was learning, on anyone who actually bothered to see her. I'm her husband. The woman's eyes narrowed. That's so. Yes. Funny. She told me she was a widow. The words hit harder than they should have. Of course she'd lied. Of course she'd rather pretend he was dead than admit she'd run from him. I need to see her. Maybe she doesn't want to see you. Maybe not. But I need to try. They stared at each other. The woman's jaw worked like she was chewing over a difficult decision. Finally she sighed. Cottage about 2 miles north. Follow the stream until you hit a fork, then take the left path. Can't miss it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She's got a wicked right hook when she's angry. Saw her deck a man who tried to cheat her at the market last week. Despite everything, Rowan felt his mouth twitch. Good for her. The walk was brutal. The wind howled across the open moors, carrying snow that stung his face and made his eyes water. His boots weren't made for this kind of terrain. They kept slipping on ice, sinking into hidden drifts. By the time he saw the cottage, his feet were soaked and his lungs burned. It was small, humble, the kind of place he would have never imagined his Duchess living in. Smoke rose from the chimney. A single window glowed with firelight. She was in there, right now. Possibly reading or cooking or doing any of 1,000 things he knew nothing about because he'd never bothered to ask. His hand was shaking when he knocked. Silence. He knocked again, louder. "I'm coming! Hold on!" Her voice, muffled by the door but unmistakably hers. "If this is about the roof again, I told you I'd pay you when—" The door swung open. She froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Rowan took in the sight of her, hair pulled back in a simple braid, no jewelry, wearing a plain wool dress that was probably older than their marriage. She looked different. Thinner, maybe, harder, but also alive. More alive than he'd ever seen her. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was flat. Not angry, not surprised, just tired. "I needed to see you." "Why?" "Can I come in?" No. He almost smiled. There was the steel he'd never let himself notice before. "Alara, you need to leave. I came all the way from— I don't care." She started to close the door. He put his hand against it, not forcing, just stopping. She glared at him. "Move your hand, Rowan." 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. "You're asking for 5 minutes of my time after you spent 10 years not caring about it at all?" "Yes." "You've got some nerve." "I know." She stared at him. He could see the moment she decided, saw the resignation flicker across her face like she was giving in to something inevitable. "Fine. 5 minutes. Then you leave and you don't come back." She stepped aside. He walked in, brushing snow from his coat. The cottage was sparse, but warm. A fire crackled in the hearth. Books stacked on a table. A half-finished embroidery project draped over a chair. The smell of bread baking. It was nothing like Blackthorn. No grandeur, no elegance, no pretense. It felt like a home. "Nice place," he said, and immediately wanted to kick himself. Nice? That was the best he could do? "You didn't come here to discuss my living arrangements." She stayed by the door, arms crossed, defensive. "Say what you came to say." He reached into his coat and pulled out the documents, set them on the table. "What's this?" "Legal transfer of the Pemberton properties, along with access to the Blackthorn accounts. It's all there. Signed and witnessed." She didn't move. "I don't understand. You wanted independence. Freedom. This gives you that. The properties generate enough income that you'll never have to worry about money. You can go anywhere, do anything. You're not tied to me anymore." Slowly, carefully, she crossed to the table and picked up the top document. Her eyes scanned the text. He watched her face, trying to read what she was thinking, but she'd gotten too good at hiding. "This is—" She looked up at him. "This is half your estate." "Yes." "You're giving me half your estate. It should have been yours from the beginning. The marriage contract was one-sided. This corrects that. And if I take this and never speak to you again, then you take it and never speak to me again." She set the document down like it might burn her. "What are you doing, Rowan?" "Trying to give you a choice, the one I should have given you 10 years ago. This isn't a choice. This is—" She shook her head, something dangerous flickering in her eyes. "This is guilt. You feel bad about how things ended, so you're throwing money at the problem like that fixes anything. That's not, isn't it?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You spent a decade ignoring me, and now you show up here with documents and grand gestures like that erases everything. Like I'm supposed to what? Fall at your feet in gratitude?" "No, I don't expect anything from you." "Then why are you here?" The question hung between them. He could feel the heat from the fire, could hear the wind rattling the windows, could see the way her hands clenched at her sides like she was fighting the urge to hit him or throw him out, or both. "Because you deserved better," he said finally. "Because I spent 10 years being a coward, and I couldn't let you spend the rest of your life thinking you didn't matter, that our marriage didn't matter. It didn't, not to you. You're wrong." "Am I?" She took a step toward him, and there was something fierce in her face now, something unleashed. "You never talked to me, never asked what I wanted or needed or felt. You treated me like a piece of furniture that happened to breathe. So don't stand there and tell me it mattered when every single day of our marriage proved otherwise." I was afraid. The admission came out rougher than he'd intended. She stopped, staring at him. "Afraid of what?" "Of failing. Of not being enough. Of—" He ran a hand through his hair. "My father was a cold bastard. Cruel. He made my mother's life hell, and she died hating him for it. I swore I'd never be like that. Never hurt someone the way he hurt her. So I kept my distance, stayed silent, thought if I didn't engage, I couldn't fail. And instead, you just disappeared." "Yes. That's not better, Rowan. That's just a different kind of cruelty." "I know." Silence. The fire popped. Outside, the wind screamed. "You should have told me," she said quietly. "All of that. The fear, the history. You should have told me instead of shutting me out." "I know. But you didn't, because talking meant being vulnerable, and you couldn't handle that. I couldn't handle a lot of things, including the fact that I was married to someone extraordinary and I was too much of a fool to see it." Her laugh was hollow. "Flattery doesn't work on me anymore. It's not flattery. It's the truth." He took a breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe me. But I needed you to know that you were never the problem. It was always me, my cowardice, my failure." She looked at him for a long time. He could see her processing, weighing, deciding. "The 5 minutes are up," she said finally. "Ilara, take your documents and go." "I don't want them. They're yours." "I don't want them either. Then burn them, sell them. I don't care. But they're not coming back with me." She picked up the stack of papers and shoved them at his chest. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to absolve yourself by signing away property. If you actually want to make things right, you're going to have to do better than legal documents and pretty speeches." "Tell me how." "I can't. That's the point. You have to figure it out yourself." She was right. Of course she was right. He'd come here thinking a grand gesture would fix everything, when what she actually needed was the one thing he'd never given her: honesty, presence, the willingness to actually try. He set the documents on the table. "I'm staying at the inn in the village. If you change your mind about the papers, about anything, you know where to find me. I won't. I know." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the latch. "For what it's worth, this place suits you. You look happy here." "I am." The words were a knife between the ribs, but he forced himself to smile. "Good. You deserve that." He stepped out into the cold. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed in his chest. The walk back to the village was worse than the walk out. The temperature had dropped, and the wind felt like it was stripping the skin from his face, but Rowan barely noticed. He was too busy replaying every word, every look, every moment of that conversation. She'd been right about everything. The documents were a coward's way out, a grand gesture that let him feel like he'd done something without actually having to do the hard work of changing, of becoming someone worth forgiving. He'd failed her again. By the time he reached the inn, his hands were so cold he could barely work the latch. Hamish was waiting in the common room, nursing what looked like whiskey. "That bad?" the driver asked. "Worse." "She send you packing?" "With good reason." Hamish grunted. "What now?" Rowan sat down heavily. "I don't know. You could go back. She doesn't want to see me, so. You're a duke. You've faced down Parliament, stubborn tenants, that incident with the French ambassador. You're going to let one angry woman send you running." "She's not just one angry woman. She's my wife." "Exactly. Which means you've got more reason to fight than you've ever had before." Rowan stared into the fire. Hamish had a point. He'd spent his whole life pushing through obstacles, refusing to accept defeat. But when it came to Ilara, he'd folded at the first sign of resistance. because deep down, he didn't think he deserved her. And maybe he didn't, but that didn't mean he shouldn't try. He stood abruptly. "I need paper and ink." Hamish raised an eyebrow. "Planning to write her a letter?" "No, planning to figure out what the hell I'm actually trying to say." He spent the rest of the night in his room, writing and crossing out and starting over, trying to put into words what he'd spent 10 years avoiding. By dawn, he had a single page covered in cramped handwriting and crossed out lines and ink blots. It was a mess, but it was honest. He folded it carefully, sealed it, and walked to the cottage as soon as there was enough light to see. This time he didn't knock. He just left the letter on her doorstep, weighted down with a stone so it wouldn't blow away. Then he walked back to the village and waited. Hours passed. Then a day. Then 2. She didn't come. Hamish was getting restless. "Your Grace, we should head back. There's a storm coming, and if we get stuck out here, give it one more day. The horses can't." "One more day." Hamish sighed but didn't argue. Rowan spent the time walking, through the village, along the frozen stream, across the moors that Alara had chosen as her refuge. He talked to locals, carefully, without mentioning why he was there. Learned that the widow from the south was well liked, that she'd helped the blacksmith's wife when she fell ill, that she'd taught the vicar's daughter to read, that she'd stood up to a drunk who'd been harassing the barmaid. She'd built a life here, a real one, full of connections and purpose, and all the things their marriage had lacked, and he wanted to destroy it by dragging her back into his world. The thought made him sick. Maybe the kindest thing he could do was leave her alone. Let her have this. Stop being selfish and let her go. He was packing his bag that evening when someone pounded on his door. "Your Grace," Hamish's voice, urgent. "You need to come. Now!" Rowan threw open the door. "What is it?" "Fire. At one of the cottages north of here. They're saying it's the widow's place." His heart stopped. He ran. The smoke was visible from half a mile away, a dark column rising into the gray sky. By the time he reached the cottage, there were already people there, locals with buckets trying to fight the flames. But the fire was too strong, fed by the wind and the dry wood. "Where is she?" he shouted at the nearest person. "Don't know." "Where is she?" Someone said they saw her go inside. He didn't wait to hear the rest. He charged toward the cottage. Someone grabbed his arm. "You'll die in there?" He shook them off and kicked through the door. The heat was immediate, crushing. Smoke filled his lungs, made his eyes water. He could barely see. "Alara!" No answer. He stumbled forward, coughing, feeling along the wall. The fire was worst on the far side. He could hear the roar of it, feel the floor creaking beneath his feet. "Alara!" A sound. Faint. Coming from the back room. He found her crumpled near the bed, unconscious. Something, a beam, maybe, had fallen and pinned her leg. "No, no, no!" He grabbed the beam, tried to lift it. It wouldn't budge. The heat was unbearable. His coat was starting to smoke. He braced his feet and pulled with everything he had. The beam shifted. An inch, 2 inches. Enough. He dragged her free, threw her over his shoulder, and ran. The doorway was collapsing as he burst through it. He felt the heat singe his hair, felt something crack behind him, and then he was outside, in the cold, falling to his knees with Alara still in his arms. Someone threw a blanket over them. Someone else was shouting for water. "Alara!" He shook her. "Alara, wake up!" She coughed, harsh, rattling. Her eyes fluttered open. "Rowan? I'm here, I've got you. The cottage. Forget the cottage. Are you hurt?" She tried to sit up, winced. "My leg." "Don't move." The village healer arrived, an old woman with gnarled hands who examined Alara with brisk efficiency. "Broken. Clean break. But it needs setting. Can you carry her to my house?" "Yes." He lifted her as carefully as he could. She didn't protest, didn't argue, just held on to his coat and let him carry her through the village while behind them, her cottage burned to ash. The healer's house smelled like dried sage and something bitter Rowan couldn't identify. He laid Alara on the narrow cot as gently as he could, but she still gasped when her leg shifted. "Out," the healer said, already rolling up her sleeves. "I need room to work." "I'm staying." The old woman turned to glare at him. "You'll be in the way." "I don't care." They stared at each other. Finally, the healer grunted. "Fine. But if you faint, I'm leaving you on the floor. She cut away the fabric around Alara's leg with quick, practiced movements. The skin was already swelling, dark bruises spreading like ink. Rowan felt his stomach turn. It's bad, Alara said quietly, looking at the ceiling. I've seen worse. The healer probed the break with fingers that made Alara go white. Clean fracture. You're lucky. Doesn't feel lucky. You're alive. That's lucky enough. She looked at Rowan. Hold her shoulders. This is going to hurt. He moved to the head of the cot, placed his hands on Alara's shoulders. She tensed under his touch. Ready? The healer asked. No, Alara said. The healer pulled. Alara's scream tore through the room. Rowan held her down as she thrashed, felt her fingernails dig into his forearms hard enough to draw blood. The sound of bone grinding against bone made his vision swim. Done, the healer said, already wrapping the leg in splints. Worst part's over. Alara was shaking, tears streaming down her face. You're a liar. Maybe, but you'll heal. The healer worked in silence, binding the leg tight, mixing something that smelled foul in a clay cup. Drink this. It'll help with the pain. Alara drank without arguing, grimacing at the taste. Within minutes, her eyes started to glaze. She'll sleep now, the healer said, probably for hours. You should rest too. I'm fine. You look like you went 3 rounds with a bear and lost. There's a chair in the corner. Use it. Rowan pulled the chair close to the cot and sat. His hands were still shaking from the fire, from the fear, from the feeling of Alara's bones moving under the healer's hands. He looked down and realized his coat was scorched, his sleeves black with soot. The healer brought him water. Drink. He did. It tasted like iron. What happened? He asked. The fire. How did it start? Don't know yet. Could have been the chimney, could have been a lamp, could have been bad luck. She paused. Or it could have been deliberate. His head snapped up. What? There's been talk. Some of the men in the village don't like her. A woman living alone, no husband, making decisions for herself, makes them uncomfortable. You think someone... I think it's worth asking questions. Rage bloomed in his chest, hot and immediate. Who? Don't know. But I'd start with Davies. He's been nursing a grudge since she turned down his offer to help manage her property. The healer's mouth twisted. Man can't handle being told no. Rowan stood. Where are you going? To find Davies. Sit down. You're in no condition. Tell me where he lives. The healer sighed. End of the village. Stone house with a red door. But if you kill him, I'm not patching you up. Noted. He was halfway to the door when Alara's voice stopped him. Rowan. Barely a whisper, slurred from whatever the healer had given her. Don't. He turned. Her eyes were half closed, but she was looking at him with something that might have been concern. You need to stay. She reached out weakly, and he found himself moving back to the cot, taking her hand. Please. Her fingers were cold. He wrapped both hands around them, trying to warm them. I'm right here. Promise me. No fighting. Alara, promise. He looked at her pale face, at the pain still etched around her eyes despite the medicine, and felt something crack in his chest. I promise. She closed her eyes. Within seconds, she was asleep. The healer snorted from across the room. That woman's got you wrapped around her finger. She always did. I was just too stupid to notice. He sat there holding Alara's hand as the light outside faded and the village settled into night. The healer moved around the room, preparing poultices and muttering to herself. At some point, she brought him bread and cheese, which he ate without tasting. How long before she can walk? He asked. 6 weeks if she's lucky, 8 if she's not, and that's if she stays off it and lets it heal proper. She won't. No. Stubborn thing nearly killed herself trying to fix that roof last month. Told her to hire someone, but would she listen? Course not. Rowan found himself almost smiling. That sounds like her. You her husband? Yes. Funny. She said she was a widow. I know. The healer studied him. You planning to drag her back south? No. Good. She's happy here. Or she was before her house burned down. The guilt hit fresh. If he hadn't come here, hadn't stirred things up. But no. That was coward's thinking, blaming himself for someone else's violence. I'll rebuild it, he said. With what? Your pretty face? With money, materials, whatever it takes. She won't accept charity. It's not charity, it's... He stopped. What was it? Restitution? Penance? A desperate attempt to fix something that had been broken long before the fire. It's what I should have done 10 years ago, he said finally. Paid attention, noticed what she needed, actually tried. The healer nodded slowly. You know what your problem is? I have a feeling you're going to tell me. You think big gestures fix things, documents, money, riding to the rescue, but that's not what she needs from you. Then what does she need? Have you tried asking her? The question sat like a stone in his gut, because of course he hadn't. He'd shown up here with his documents and his guilt and his assumptions about what would make things right, and he'd never once asked what she actually wanted. Same mistake, different setting. Alara stirred in her sleep, her face creasing with pain even through the medicine. Rowan squeezed her hand gently. I'm an idiot, he muttered. Most men are, the healer said. The question is whether you're smart enough to learn. He stayed awake all night watching Alara sleep. Every time she shifted, he tensed, ready to call the healer. But she slept deeply, the medicine doing its work, and by dawn her breathing had evened out and some color had returned to her face. The healer checked the splint as the sun rose. Good. No fever. No swelling in the toes. She'll do. Is it safe to move her? Where to? The inn. She can't stay here. Why not? I've got the room. Because... He struggled to articulate it. Because he needed to take care of her. Because he couldn't stand the thought of leaving her in someone else's care. Because for the first time in years, he had a purpose that didn't involve estate management or social obligations or any of the other hollow routines that had defined his life. Because I need to, he said finally. The healer looked at him for a long moment. Fine, but she stays flat. No sitting up, no stairs. And if that leg gets worse, it's on you. Understood. He carried Alara through the village, wrapped in blankets, moving as carefully as if she were made of glass. She woke halfway there, confused and groggy. Where? The inn. You need somewhere warm to recover. My cottage is gone. I'm sorry. She was quiet for a moment, then, so softly he almost missed it. Everything I had was in there. I know. The books, my mother's hairbrush, the paintings. I know. Her voice broke. I had so little, Rowan, and now I have nothing. That's not true. You have... He stopped. What did she have? A broken leg? A husband who'd failed her? Legal documents she didn't want? Nothing she'd actually chosen. You have me, he said quietly, for whatever that's worth. She didn't answer, just closed her eyes and let him carry her. The innkeeper took one look at them and started barking orders. Within minutes, they had the best room. Small, but clean, with a real bed and a window that let in morning light. Rowan laid Alara down carefully, propped her leg on pillows the way the healer had instructed. I need to talk to some people, he said. Will you be all right alone for a bit? I've been alone for months. That's not what I meant. She looked at him, really looked, in a way she hadn't since he'd arrived, taking in his scorched coat, his soot-stained face, his hands that were still shaking slightly. You went into the fire, she said. Yes. You could have died. So could you. That's not... She shook her head. Why would you do that? Because you're my wife. That didn't matter before. It always mattered. I was just too much of a coward to show it. She stared at him, something unreadable in her eyes. I don't know what to do with you. You don't have to do anything. Just rest. He left before she could argue, before he could say something else that would push her further away. Hamish was waiting downstairs. How is she? Alive, angry, hurt. So, normal then. Despite everything, Rowan almost laughed. I need you to do something. Name it. Find out everything you can about a man named Davies, who he is, what he does, where he was when the fire started. Be discreet. Hamish's expression darkened. You think he started it? I think it's worth knowing. And if he did, then I'll deal with it. Without killing him, he added, seeing the look on Hamish's face. I promised. Pity. While Hamish asked questions, Rowan walked back to what was left of the cottage. In daylight, the destruction was worse. The walls had collapsed. The roof was gone. Everything inside was ash and charred wood and twisted metal. He sifted through the ruins carefully, looking for anything salvageable. Found the remains of books, pages turned to black flakes that disintegrated when he touched them. Found what might have been the silver hairbrush, melted beyond recognition. Found nothing worth keeping. She'd been right. She had nothing now. Shame, isn't it? He turned to find an older man watching him, arms crossed, weathered face, calloused hands, the blacksmith maybe, or a farmer. Did you know her? Rowan asked. Everyone knew her. Good woman. Didn't deserve this. No. You're the husband. Yes. The man spat into the dirt. Took you long enough to show up. I know. She cried for months, tried to hide it, but we could all see. Then one day she stopped, dried up like a well. That's when we knew she was done with you. The words landed like blows. I'm trying to fix it, Rowan said. Can't fix what's burned. Best you can do is build something new. Is that what she wants? Hell if I know. That's between you two. The man paused. But I'll tell you this. She's tougher than you think. Tougher than she thinks, probably. She'll survive this. Question is whether you will. He walked away before Rowan could respond. Hamish found him an hour later, standing in the ruins. Davies was at the tavern when the fire started. At least a dozen witnesses. Rowan's hands clenched. Then who? Could have been an accident, chimney sparks, faulty lamp. The healer said the cottage was old. Or it could have been someone else. Could have been. But without proof. I know. They stood there in the wreckage. Rowan felt the weight of it settle over him, the impossibility of fixing what had been destroyed, of proving what couldn't be proven, of making things right when the universe seemed determined to tear them apart. What now? Hamish asked. Now I do what I should have done from the start. I ask her what she wants. He returned to the inn to find Ilara awake, staring at the ceiling. She turned her head when he entered. How bad is it? He didn't insult her by lying. Gone. All of it. She closed her eyes. Of course. I can rebuild. Stop. She held up a hand. Just stop. I don't want your money or your guilt or your grand gestures. I don't know what I want, but it's not that. He pulled the chair close to the bed. Then tell me, what do you want? I don't know. Try. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, he could hear the village waking up. Horses, voices, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer. I want to matter, she said finally. Not as a duchess, or a title, or someone's wife. Just as myself. I want someone to see me and not look away. I see you. Now. After I left, after I lost everything. But where were you before? I was scared. Of what? Of this? Of needing someone. Of them seeing who I really am and deciding I'm not enough. He leaned forward. My father destroyed my mother. Not with cruelty, with absence. He was there in body but never in spirit, and it killed something in her. I watched it happen year after year, and I swore I'd never do that to anyone. So I kept my distance, stayed safe, and destroyed me anyway. Yes, you can't build a life on fear, Rowan. I know that now. She looked at him. What changed? You left, and suddenly the safe, controlled life I'd built felt like a tomb. I'd spent 10 years protecting myself from pain, and all I'd done was guarantee it. So you came here to fix it. I came here because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. Even if you send me away. Even if you never forgive me. I needed you to know that you mattered. That you always mattered, even when I was too broken to show it. Her eyes were wet. I can't go back to how things were. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking... He stopped. Took a breath. I'm asking if you'd be willing to start over. Not as the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn. Just as two people trying to figure out if they can build something real. I don't trust you. I know. And I don't know if I ever will again. I know that too. Then what are you asking for? A chance, that's all. A chance to prove I can be someone worth trusting. She looked away. My leg's broken. My home's gone. I have nowhere to go. You can stay here. I'll pay for the room for as long as you need. And then what? That's up to you. If you want to rebuild the cottage, I'll help. If you want to go somewhere else, I'll arrange it. If you want me to leave and never come back, his voice cracked. I'll do that too. You really mean that? Yes. She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, I need time. To heal, to think, to figure out what I actually want instead of what I think I should want. How much time? I don't know. Take as much as you need. I'll stay in the village. You want me to leave? Just say the word. Why would you do that? You have an estate to run, responsibilities. None of them matter as much as this. You don't mean that. I do. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. I've spent my whole life putting duty first. Obligations, what was expected. And it made me miserable. Made you miserable. I'm done with that. Whatever happens next, it's going to be a choice, not an obligation. Her fingers tightened on his, just barely. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. What if we try and it still doesn't work? Then at least we tried. At least we chose it. She looked at their joined hands. I don't forgive you. Not yet. I don't expect you to. And I'm still angry. You should be. And I might decide I'm better off alone. That's your right. She met his eyes. But you can stay in the village, not here, but close, while I figure things out. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even trust. But it was something, a crack in the wall, a possibility. Thank you, he said. She pulled her hand back. Don't make me regret it. I'll try my best not to. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Rowan took a room at the inn, small, cold, nothing like what he was used to. He spent mornings walking the moors trying to clear his head. Afternoons he helped with whatever needed doing in the village, repairs, hauling supplies, clearing snow. The locals were wary at first, suspicious of the southern aristocrat who'd shown up and disrupted their quiet widow's life. But he worked without complaint, didn't pull rank, and slowly they began to accept his presence, if not his purpose. Evenings, he sat with Alara. Not talking, at first. Just sitting, reading while she dozed, bringing her meals, helping her shift position when the leg ached. Small things, unremarkable things. The things he should have been doing all along. Tell me about the estate, she said one night. He looked up from his book. What about it? What's happening while you're gone? Garrett's managing, probably better than I ever did. You don't miss it? Parts of it. The land, the horses, the library. He paused. But the rest, the obligations, the social climbing, the endless parade of people who don't actually care, no, I don't miss that at all. What would you do? If you could do anything? I don't know. I've never let myself think about it. Think about it now. He set the book aside. Smaller estate, somewhere quiet. Work the land myself instead of watching others do it. Breed horses, maybe. Read. Actually talk to my wife instead of treating her like a ghost. He stopped. That's probably ridiculous. It's not. It sounds nice. What about you? What would you do? I was doing it before the fire. Teaching? How did you... The villagers talk. They said you were helping the vicar's daughter learn to read. She looked surprised. You've been asking about me. Of course I have. Why? Because I want to know you, actually know you, not the version I made up in my head. She was quiet. Then, I like teaching, helping, feeling useful. The cottage was small, but it was mine. I could wake up when I wanted, eat what I wanted, spend my days however I chose. It was the first time I'd ever felt like my life belonged to me. And I took that away. The fire took it away. I brought complications, attention. Maybe someone saw me visiting and decided to... Don't. She cut him off. Don't take responsibility for other people's cruelty. You've got enough to answer for without adding that. It should have stung. Instead, it felt almost like absolution. Fair enough. 2 weeks passed. Alara's legs started to heal. The swelling went down. The bruises faded from black to purple to yellow-green. The healer pronounced her progress satisfactory and reduced the pain medicine, which meant Alara was more alert but also more irritable. I hate this, she said one afternoon, glaring at the splinted leg. I hate being helpless. You're not helpless. You're healing. Same thing. It's not. Easy for you to say you're not the one stuck in bed. He thought about pointing out that he'd spent the last 2 weeks sleeping in a room barely bigger than a closet, working manual labor for the first time in his life, and existing in a state of permanent uncertainty about whether his wife would ever speak to him again. But Alara was in pain and bored, and he knew better than to argue. What can I do? He asked instead. Nothing. There's nothing anyone can do except wait. I could read to you. I'm sick of being read to. I could... Rowan. She looked at him. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you don't have to entertain me every second. Sometimes people just need to be miserable for a while. I know, He stopped. I want to help. I know you do. But you can't fix this, any of it. You can just be here. And let me be angry and frustrated and scared without trying to make it better. It went against every instinct he had, but he nodded. All right. Thank you. He stood to leave. Where are you going? You said you wanted space. I said you couldn't fix it. I didn't say leave. She patted the chair. Sit. You can read. I'll just be quietly furious over here. He sat, opened his book, tried to focus on the words while acutely aware of her presence, the sound of her breathing, the way she shifted restlessly, the small sighs of frustration. This was harder than grand gestures, harder than documents or money or riding to the rescue. This was just existing in discomfort without trying to escape it. But he stayed. The break came 3 weeks after the fire. Alara woke up screaming. Rowan was downstairs eating breakfast when he heard it, ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, burst into her room to find her sitting up in bed, face white, leg twisted at a wrong angle. What happened? I fell. Tried to get it up on my own. Her voice was tight with pain. Something's wrong. He could see it immediately. The splint had shifted. The leg was swelling again. Don't move. I'm getting the healer. He ran through the village, pounded on the healer's door until she answered, looking murderous. What? Alara. Her leg. Something's wrong. The murderous look vanished. Get my bag. They were back at the inn within minutes. The healer cut away the splint with quick, brutal efficiency. Alara bit her lip hard enough to draw blood. The bone shifted, the healer said. Probably when you fell. It's not broken again, but... She probed the leg. Alara went white. It's set wrong now. I'll have to reset it. No, Alara said. No, I can't. You don't have a choice. If we leave it like this, you'll walk with a limp for the rest of your life. I don't care. Yes, you do. The healer's voice was iron. You're young, strong. You've got a whole life ahead of you. I'm not letting you ruin it because you're scared of pain. Tears streamed down Alara's face. Please. Rowan moved to the bed, sat beside her. I'll be right here. The whole time. It's going to hurt worse than before. I know. I don't think I can do this. You can. You're the strongest person I've ever met. She laughed wetly. That's a low bar. Maybe. But it's still true. The healer mixed medicine, stronger this time. Drink all of it. Alara did. Within minutes, her eyes started to glaze, but she was still conscious, still aware. Hold her, the healer said. Rowan braced himself against the headboard, wrapped his arms around Alara's shoulders. She was trembling. Ready? No? The healer pulled. Alara's scream echoed through the inn. Rowan held her as she fought, felt her nails rake down his arms, felt her entire body go rigid with agony. The sound of bone grinding was worse the second time. Worse because he knew what it meant. Worse because he could feel her breaking apart in his arms, and there was nothing he could do except hold on. Almost, the healer grunted. There. A final wrench. Alara went limp. Is she... fainted. Better that way? The healer was already splinting the leg again, working fast. This needs to heal proper now. No more getting up, no more trying to do things herself. Complete bed rest for at least another month. She'll hate that. She'll hate a permanent limp more. When Alara woke, the room was dark. Rowan was asleep in the chair beside her, his head tipped back against the wall at an angle that would leave his neck screaming. His arms were bandaged where she'd scratched him. She felt hollowed out, empty. The pain was there but distant, muffled by whatever the healer had given her. "Rowan," she whispered. He jerked awake immediately. "What is it? Are you—" "I'm fine. Or as fine as I can be." He rubbed his face. "The healer said it went well. The bone's set properly now." "How long was I out?" 6 hours. "You stayed the whole time." "Of course." She looked at him, really looked, at the exhaustion carved into his face, at the bandages on his arms, at the way he was sitting forward like he was ready to spring into action at any moment. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "All of it. Staying, helping, putting up with me being angry and scared and impossible. Because I love you." The words fell into the silence between them. "You don't," she said automatically. "I do." "You don't know me well enough to love me. You're right. I don't know your favorite color or what you dream about or 1,000 other things I should have learned years ago. But I know you're brave and kind and stronger than you realize. I know you'd rather live in a freezing cottage than a mansion where you weren't seen. I know you care about people, really care, in a way I never learned how to. And I know that losing you was the worst thing that's ever happened to me." He leaned forward. "So maybe it's not love yet. Maybe it's just the beginning of love. But it's real, and I'm not going anywhere." Alara felt tears sliding down her face. "I don't know how to trust you." "Then don't. Not yet. Just let me stay. Let me prove it." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." She reached out. He took her hand immediately. 1 month, she said. "You have 1 month to prove this is real. If at the end of that time I still don't believe you, then I'll go. I promise." She closed her eyes. "This is a mistake." "Probably. We're going to hurt each other again." "Almost certainly." "Then why?" "Because some things are worth the risk." She fell asleep still holding his hand, and for the first time since the fire, she didn't dream of smoke and burning. The month began with rules. Not the kind Rowan would have expected. No formal agreements or written contracts, just boundaries. Alara laid out the morning after her leg was reset, her voice still rough from screaming. "You don't get to make decisions for me," she said. "Not about my care, not about where I go when I'm healed, not about anything. If I want your opinion, I'll ask. All right. And you don't get to hover. I know you mean well, but I need space to breathe." "Understood. And if I tell you to leave, I'll leave." She studied him, looking for cracks in the promise. "Just like that? Just like that? Even if you think I'm making a mistake? Especially then. Your mistakes are yours to make." She seemed almost disappointed, like she'd been expecting a fight. "Fine. Then we'll try this. 1 month." 1 month turned out to be harder than either of them expected. The first week, Rowan threw himself into work. The village needed things, roofs repaired before winter hit full force, firewood chopped and stacked, a bridge over the stream that had been half-collapsed for years. He worked alongside men who still didn't trust him, whose silence spoke louder than any accusation. "You trying to buy forgiveness?" one of them finally asked. Thomas, the blacksmith, a man built like an ox with hands that could bend iron. Rowan straightened from the post he'd been setting. "No? Then why are you here? Duke's got no business doing peasant work." "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I should have been doing this all along instead of sitting in my study counting money." Thomas spat into the dirt. "Pretty words." "Not words, just truth. Truth is you hurt that woman. Made her cry when she thought no one was looking. Now you show up playing hero and expect us to forget?" "I don't expect anything. I'm just trying to be useful." "Useful?" Thomas snorted. "You know what would be useful? Leaving her alone, letting her heal without you stirring up old wounds." Rowan drove the post deeper, muscles burning. "She asked me to stay. She's too kind for her own good. Maybe. Or maybe she's giving me a chance I don't deserve. Either way, I'm not wasting it." Thomas watched him work for a long moment, then grudgingly, "Post crooked, pull it up and start again." It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't outright hostility either. Progress came in inches. Alara, trapped in bed, grew restless and mean. The medicine made her foggy, but not foggy enough to dull the rage of being helpless. She snapped at the healer, threw a bowl of soup at the wall when it was too salty, and told Rowan to get out at least 3 times a day. He got out, came back when she called for him, which she always did within an hour, looking furious about it. "I hate this," she said one afternoon. "I know. I hate needing help, hate being useless." "You're not useless. You're injured. There's a difference." "Doesn't feel like it." He was sitting by the window mending one of his shirts because he'd torn it hauling timber and couldn't afford to replace it. The realization had been startling. For the first time in his life, money actually mattered. He had enough for the room, for food, for Alara's care, but not enough for waste. It felt right somehow, like he was finally living in the same world as everyone else. "Tell me about the estate," Alara said suddenly. He looked up. "I thought you didn't want to hear about it." "I don't. But I'm bored, and you're terrible at conversation, so it'll have to do." Despite himself, he smiled. "What do you want to know?" "Is Garrett managing?" "Better than I ever did, according to his last letter." "He writes to you? Once a week? Updates on accounts, repairs, tenant issues, the usual." And the place is fine, running smoothly. Turns out I wasn't as essential as I thought." She was quiet. Then, "That must sting." "It's liberating, actually. Means I've been wasting my life on something that didn't need me when I could have been—" He stopped. "When you could have been what?" "Doing this, being here, trying to figure out what actually matters." "And what does matter?" He set down the shirt. "You do. This does. The bridge Thomas and I are building, the roof we patched for the widow down the road, coming back here at night and knowing you might yell at me or throw soup, but at least you're talking to me. That's a low bar. It's higher than I had before." She looked at him, really looked, in that way that made him feel stripped bare. "You're different here." "How?" "Less controlled, more real, like you're not performing being a duke every second." "I'm not a duke here. I'm just Rowan." "Is that enough?" "I don't know, but it's all I've got." The days blurred together. Work, meals, sitting with Alara. Slowly, grudgingly, the village began to accept him. Not warmly, that would take years if ever, but with a kind of wary tolerance. Thomas invited him to the tavern one night. Rowan almost refused, too exhausted from a day spent hauling stones for the bridge. But something in the blacksmith's expression made him agree. The tavern was packed, loud with voices and the smell of ale and unwashed bodies. Men made space at the bar when Thomas waved them over. Someone shoved a mug into Rowan's hand. "Drink up," Thomas said. "You've earned it." The ale was terrible, warm and bitter, and probably made in someone's cellar. Rowan drank it anyway. "So," Thomas said, after a long pull from his own mug, "you planning to take her back south? That's up to her. And if she says yes, then we go. If she says no, we don't." "You'd stay here?" "If that's what she wanted." Thomas shook his head. "You're either the biggest fool I've ever met or the most dedicated." "Can't it be both?" That got a laugh. Rough, surprised, but real. "You're all right," Thomas said finally, "for a duke." It shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but Rowan found himself smiling into his terrible ale, feeling something like acceptance settle in his chest. The turning point came 3 weeks into the month. Alara's leg was healing well enough that the healer cleared her to sit up, to move around the room with crutches. Not far, just to the chair by the window, to the wash basin. But after weeks of being trapped in bed, even that felt like freedom. Rowan came back from work one evening to find her standing at the window, balanced on the crutches, looking out at the village. "Should you be up?" "Healer said I could move around." "This is moving around." "You're supposed to take it slow, but—" "I am taking it slow. This is as slow as I get." He set down his tools and crossed to stand beside her. From this angle, he could see the village square, people moving about their evening routines, the blacksmith closing up his forge, children chasing each other through the snow, the baker pulling the last loaves from his oven. "It's a good place," Alara said quietly. "It is. I didn't think I'd find somewhere like this, somewhere that felt like home." "I'm glad you did." She turned to look at him. "What about you? Does it feel like home?" He thought about it. The cramped room, the hard work, the suspicious glances that had only recently started to soften, the way his hands had calluses now, the way his back ached at night from labor instead of sitting at a desk. "It's starting to," he said. "Even though you're sleeping in a room the size of a closet and working yourself to exhaustion, especially because of that, I spent 30 years being comfortable and miserable. I'll take uncomfortable and alive." "You're strange, Rowan Hale." "I know." She shifted on the crutches, and he moved automatically to steady her. She didn't pull away. "The healer says another 3 weeks before I can walk without help," she said. "That's good progress. It means I need to start thinking about what comes next." His stomach tightened. "And?" "I don't know yet, but I need to figure it out before the month is up." "Whatever you decide, I know. You'll accept it. You've said that a dozen times." "Because I mean it." She looked at him. "What if I decide I want to stay here, rebuild the cottage, keep teaching, live alone? Then I'll help you rebuild and leave you alone. And if I decide I want to come back to Blackthorn, then we'll go back. Together." "What if I can't decide? What if I don't know what I want?" "Then we'll figure it out together, or separately. However you need to do it." She laughed, but it sounded pained. "How are you so calm about this?" "I'm not calm, I'm terrified. But I spent 10 years trying to control everything, and all it did was drive you away. I'm not making that mistake again. Even if it means losing me for good, even then." She studied his face like she was looking for the lie. When she didn't find it, something in her expression shifted. "I need to sit down." He helped her back to the chair, made sure the leg was elevated properly. She leaned back with a sigh. "I got a letter today," she said. "From who?" "Mrs. Brennan, the housekeeper." Rowan froze. "What did she say?" "That the estate misses me, that the staff asks about me, that they hope I'm well." She paused. "And that you've been sending your entire salary to cover my expenses here." He didn't have a defense for that. "I didn't want you to worry about money. You're not taking any income at all?" "I don't need it. I've got enough for the room and food. The rest should go to you." "That's..." She shook her head. "That's your money, your estate. It's our estate. Or it was supposed to be. I'm just correcting an old mistake." "By bankrupting yourself?" "I'm not bankrupt. I'm just living like a normal person for the first time in my life." "You're impossible." "I've been told." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Mrs. Brennan also said the servants have been asking when I'm coming home. They miss you. They barely knew me. They knew you better than they knew me. You were kind to them, remembered their names, their families. I never did that. Because you were too busy being important. Because I was too busy being afraid of being human." She looked at him. "And now?" "Now I'm still afraid, but I'm trying to be human anyway." The silence that followed felt different, charged, like they were standing on the edge of something that could break them or save them, and neither knew which way it would tip. "I need to tell you something," Ilara said finally. "All right. I didn't just leave because you ignored me. I left because I was disappearing. Every day I stayed, I felt a little less real, like I was becoming the ghost you treated me as. And I was so angry, at you, yes, but also at myself for letting it happen, for not fighting harder, for accepting crumbs and calling it enough." Her hands were clenched in her lap. Rowan wanted to reach for them, but he held back. "When I came here," she continued, "I thought I was looking for independence, freedom, but what I was really looking for was myself, the parts I'd lost or hidden or never let exist. And I found them. In this village, in the cottage, in the work I was doing, I became real again." "I'm glad," he said quietly. "But then the fire happened, and you showed up. And suddenly I'm back in this position where I need help, where I can't take care of myself, where someone else is making decisions about my care and my future. And it's terrifying. I'm not trying to take that away from you. I know, but you are anyway, just by being here, by caring, by making it so I can't hate you cleanly anymore." "Would it be easier if I left?" "Yes. And no." She looked at him. "That's the problem. I don't know what I want. Part of me wants you gone so I can go back to being independent and self-sufficient. Part of me..." She stopped. "Part of me is glad you're here, glad you stayed, glad you're trying even though it's hard and messy and there's no guarantee it'll work." "Which part is louder?" "I don't know. They're about equal right now." He nodded slowly. Then I'll keep staying until one of them wins. What if the part that wants you gone wins? Then I'll go, and I'll be grateful I got to try. She reached out. He met her halfway, and their fingers interlaced carefully, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. One more week, she said. Then I decide. One more week. The final week felt both endless and too short. Rowan finished the bridge with Thomas and half the village turning out to help. It wasn't much, just a simple wooden structure over the stream, but when they were done, Thomas clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to bruise. Good work, the blacksmith said. Couldn't have done it without you. Damn right, but you pulled your weight. That counts for something. That night, the village threw a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just ale and bread and a fire in the square. Rowan stood off to the side, watching people laugh and talk and enjoy the simple fact of having a working bridge. The woman from the general store approached him. You did good. Thank you. Still don't trust you completely, but you've earned some respect. I'll take it. She studied him. You really love her, don't you? Yes. Then don't mess it up again. We're running out of cottages for her to live in. Despite the anxiety twisting in his gut, he almost laughed. The next morning, he found Alara already awake, sitting by the window with her crutches leaning against the wall. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much thinking. He sat across from her. Want to talk about it? Not yet, but soon. The day crawled by. Rowan tried to work, couldn't focus. Tried to read, couldn't retain the words. Finally gave up and just walked. Through the village, along the stream, up to where the cottage had been. Someone had cleared the rubble. The ground was bare now, just scorched earth and snow. But there were also stakes in the ground, string marking where walls might go. Found you! He turned to find Alara leaning heavily on her crutches, breath coming hard from the walk. You shouldn't be up here. The ground's not safe. Stop. I needed to see it. She moved carefully to stand beside him, looking at the empty space where her home had been. I kept thinking I'd feel something when I saw it again, she said. Grief, anger, loss. But I don't. It's just empty. Maybe that's not a bad thing. It means you've let it go. Or it means I've given up. Do you feel like you've given up? She was quiet. Then, no, I feel like I'm ready to choose something instead of just surviving. His heart was pounding. And what are you choosing? She turned to face him. I want to rebuild. Not the cottage. Not exactly. Something bigger. A real house. With room for a school. I want to teach properly. Not just help when I can. I want to build something that lasts. Here? In the village? Yes. This is home now. I can't go back to Blackthorn and pretend to be someone I'm not. But I can't stay in that inn room forever either. I need my own space, my own life. I'll help however I can. I'm not finished. She took a breath. I want to build it with you. The words hung in the cold air. With me, he repeated carefully. Not for me. With me. As partners. Equal say in decisions, equal work. No titles, no duchy nonsense. Just two people building a life together. Alara, but I have conditions. All right? We don't go back to Blackthorn, not to live. You can visit for estate business, but our home is here. Done. And you don't get to make decisions about my life, my teaching, my work, my time. It's mine. You get a say when it affects both of us, but otherwise I'm in charge of myself. Agreed. And if I ever feel like I'm disappearing again, like I'm becoming a ghost, I get to leave. No arguments. No trying to fix it with grand gestures. I just go. That one hurt. But he nodded. Yes. And you have to actually talk to me about your feelings, your fears, your day, all of it. No more silence. That might be the hardest one. I know, but it's non-negotiable. Then yes, I'll talk. She searched his face. You're agreeing to all of this awfully fast. Because it's everything I want. A life with you, a real one. Building something together instead of existing in the same house as strangers. I don't care if it's here or on the moon or in a cave. As long as it's real. What about the estate? Your responsibilities? Garrett can manage it. I'll sign over more authority, check in monthly. But you're right. I've been using duty as an excuse to avoid actually living. I'm done with that. And the title, being a duke, is just a word. It doesn't define me. Or it shouldn't. I'd rather be Rowan the carpenter, or Rowan the teacher's husband, than the Duke of Blackthorn who doesn't know his own wife. Tears were sliding down her face. I'm still angry at you. I know. And it's going to take time before I trust you completely. I know that too. And we're probably going to fight and mess this up and hurt each other. Almost definitely. Then why are you smiling? Because you're giving me a chance. Because we're going to try. Because for the first time in my life, I'm choosing something real instead of something safe. She wiped her face roughly. You're going to have to learn how to build an actual house. With your hands. No hiring it out. I'm aware. And help teach. The children need someone to work with the older boys. I can do that. And stop being so agreeable. It's unsettling. He laughed. Tell me to do something I'd actually disagree with, and I'll start arguing. Fine. Kiss me. His laughter died. What? You heard me. If we're doing this, building a life together, being partners, I need to know if there's anything there beyond obligation and guilt. So kiss me. And if it feels wrong, we'll know this is a mistake. His hands were shaking as he stepped closer. And if it feels right, then we'll figure out the rest as we go. He cupped her face gently, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Her eyes were steady on his, challenging and afraid and hopeful all at once. He kissed her. It wasn't like their wedding kiss. That had been perfunctory, meaningless, a formality. This was hesitant and terrifying and real. Her lips were cold from the wind. She tasted like the tea she'd been drinking. When his thumb brushed her cheekbone, she made a small sound and leaned into him. When they broke apart, she was crying. Well? He asked, voice rough. It didn't feel wrong. No? No. It felt like coming home. He pulled her close, carefully, mindful of her leg, and held her while she cried against his chest. Relief and fear, and something that might have been joy all tangled together. We're really doing this, she said. We're really doing this. We're going to mess it up. Probably. But we'll mess it up together. She pulled back enough to look at him. I need you to promise me something. Anything. If this doesn't work, if we try and fail, and it all falls apart, you won't make it harder than it has to be. No fighting to keep me. No grand gestures. Just let me go. It felt like she was asking him to put a knife to his own throat, but he nodded. I promise. Then let's go tell the healer I'm not living in that inn room anymore. We've got a house to build. The news spread through the village like fire. The Duchess and the Duke were staying, building a house, starting a school. Some people were skeptical, thought it was another rich person's whim that would fade when winter got harsh or the work got hard. But Thomas and the healer and the woman from the general store vouched for them, and that counted for something. The day they broke ground on the new house, half the village showed up to help. Bigger than the cottage, Thomas said, looking at the marked foundation. You sure about this? We need room for a school, Alara said. She was still on crutches but insisted on being there. And proper quarters. Maybe space for a few students to stay if they come from far out. Ambitious. We've got time, Thomas grunted. We'll see if you still think that when you're hauling timber in February. They started with the foundation. Rowan worked until his hands bled, then wrapped them and kept working. Learned how to mix mortar, set stone, measure twice, and cut once. Made mistakes. Fixed them. Made more mistakes. Alara directed from her chair, sketching plans and adjusting measurements. She had a vision for this place. Not just a house, but a home. A school. A gathering place for the community. Something real. At night they collapsed in their separate rooms at the inn, exhausted and sore. But there was a lightness between them now. A possibility. They talked about the house, about teaching plans, about everything except the thing they were both thinking, whether they could actually make this work. 4 weeks into construction, Alara's crutches came off. The healer examined her leg, pronounced it healed enough to walk unsupported, and dismissed them with instructions to take it slow. Alara took 3 steps and nearly fell. Rowan caught her. Slowly, he said. I'm going slowly. My leg's just forgotten how to work. Then let it remember. We've got time. She leaned on him, and they walked together through the village. People called out greetings, asked about the house, offered help. They like us, Elara said, sounding surprised. They like you. They tolerate me. It's a start. That night, Rowan knocked on her door. Come in. He found her sitting by the fire, leg propped up. She'd been walking too much. He could see it in the tightness around her eyes. You should rest. I will. In a minute. She gestured to the other chair. Sit. We need to talk. His stomach dropped. All right. The month's up. I know. I said I'd decide whether this was real or not. And? She looked at him. I think it's real. Fragile and terrifying and probably going to explode in our faces at some point, but real. Relief made him lightheaded. So we keep going. We keep going, but I need you to understand something. What? This isn't a happy ending. This is a beginning. We're not fixed. We haven't solved anything. We're just two damaged people trying to build something better than what we had. I know. And it's going to be hard. Harder than anything we've done so far. I'm counting on it. She almost smiled. Why? Because nothing worth having comes easy. And you're worth every second of hard. That was almost smooth. I'm trying. She stood, crossed to him. He stood too, uncertain. She took his hand. I'm going to kiss you now, she said, and if you make it weird, I'll push you out the window. Noted. This kiss was different than the first, less hesitant, more sure. When she pulled back, she was smiling. The house is going to take months to finish, she said, at least. And we're going to fight about stupid things like where the windows go and what color to paint the walls. Definitely. And I'm still not sure I can fully trust you. That's fair, but I want to try. Then we'll try. She rested her forehead against his. This is insane. Completely. We're going to regret this. Maybe, but at least we'll regret it together. She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. Outside, snow was falling. The village was settling in for the night, and two people who'd spent years avoiding each other stood together in the firelight, choosing to be brave. It wasn't a solution, it wasn't a guarantee, but it was real. And for the first time in either of their lives, that was enough. The month Elara had given him felt both endless and impossibly short. Rowan threw himself into it with a kind of desperate focus he'd never applied to anything in his life. Not estate management, not social obligations, not even self-preservation. Every morning he woke before dawn in his cramped room at the inn and asked himself the same question, what does she need today? Sometimes the answer was simple. Firewood carried up the stairs. Fresh bread from the baker. Books borrowed from the vicar's surprisingly extensive library. Other times it was harder, sitting with her through the long afternoons when the pain was bad and the boredom worse, listening to her rage against the confinement without trying to fix it, just being present in her frustration. He learned things, small things that felt enormous in their intimacy. She hated the taste of the healer's pain medicine, but never complained about taking it. She had nightmares about the fire. Would wake gasping, and he'd learned to just hand her water without asking if she was all right, because the question only made it worse. She read poetry when she was sad, and history when she was angry. She picked at her food when she was worried and ate with surprising appetite when she felt safe. He was learning to read her. Finally, 10 years too late, but learning nonetheless. You're staring, she said one afternoon without looking up from her book. Sorry. No, you're not. You're right, I'm not. She glanced at him over the top of the page. It's unnerving. I'll stop. I didn't say stop. I said it's unnerving. She marked her place and set the book aside. What are you thinking about? You. Obviously. But what about me? He considered lying, deflecting, but they'd spent 10 years doing that and look where it had gotten them. I was thinking that I don't know if a month is enough time to undo 10 years of damage, and I was wondering what I'll do if it's not. She was quiet for a moment. What would you do? Honestly? I don't know. Part of me thinks I should respect your decision and leave. Let you build the life you want without me complicating it. But another part... He stopped. Another part thinks I should stay anyway. Keep trying. Because maybe some things are worth fighting for, even when you're not sure you'll win. That's not very practical. No. But Nothing about this is practical. She studied him with those sharp eyes that had always seen more than he was comfortable showing. You've changed. Have I? The Rowan I married would never have said any of that. He would have made a logical argument about duty and expectations and what made sense. He wouldn't have admitted uncertainty. The Rowan you married was a coward. Maybe. But at least I knew what to expect from him. She shifted in the bed, wincing slightly. This version of you, the one who carries firewood and admits when he's scared, I don't know what to do with him. Is that bad? I don't know yet. It wasn't the answer he wanted. But it was honest, and he was learning to value honesty over comfort. The village slowly became familiar. He learned the rhythms of it. When the baker opened, which path through the moors was least treacherous in snow. How to read the sky for incoming storms. He learned names, faces, stories. The blacksmith had a daughter with a talent for drawing. The woman who ran the general store was saving money to visit her sister in Edinburgh. The farmer whose land bordered the ruins of Alara's cottage had fought in the war and still woke screaming some nights. They were real people with real lives, and Rowan had spent most of his existence pretending people like them didn't exist outside of abstract obligations and economic concerns. You're different here, Hamish observed one evening over cheap whiskey in the common room. How so? Less, the driver searched for the word. Rigid. You actually smile sometimes. It's disturbing. Despite himself, Rowan laughed. Thanks. I'm serious. At Blackthorn, you were wound so tight I kept expecting you to snap. Here you're almost human. Almost? Don't push it. They drank in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Hamish said, We need to go back eventually. The estate won't run itself forever. I know. So what's the plan? There isn't one. Hamish raised an eyebrow. The Duke of Blackthorn doesn't have a plan? Should I check you for fever? I'm serious. For the first time in my life, I don't have everything mapped out and controlled. And it's terrifying, but it's also... He paused. It's honest. I'm here because I choose to be. Not because of duty or expectation or what makes strategic sense. Just choice. And if she chooses to send you away, then I go. But at least I'll know I actually tried instead of just going through the motions. Hamish shook his head. You're either the bravest man I know or the stupidest. Probably both. The turning point came 3 weeks into the month. Rowan was helping the blacksmith repair a wagon wheel when someone ran into the forge, shouting about smoke. His blood went cold. Not again. Please, not again. But it wasn't Alara's place, just a chimney fire at one of the outlying farms, already under control by the time he got there. Still, his hand shook for an hour afterward. He returned to the inn to find Alara sitting up in bed with a strange expression on her face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just realized something. What? You ran toward the smoke. Someone said they saw you sprinting across the moors like something was chasing you. I thought... He stopped. I thought it might be another fire. And your first instinct was to run toward it. Of course. Why? He stared at her. Because you're here. Because the thought of you in danger makes me... He couldn't finish the sentence. Makes you what? Insane. Terrified. Willing to do incredibly stupid things like run into burning buildings. She looked at him for a long moment. Sit down. He sat. I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to just listen. Don't interrupt. Don't try to fix anything. Just listen. All right. She took a breath. When I left Blackthorn, I thought I was done. With you. With marriage. With hoping for something that clearly wasn't going to happen. I was so tired, Rowan. Tired of being invisible. Tired of trying to be enough for someone who didn't seem to want anything from me, except silence. He kept his mouth shut through force of will. Coming here was supposed to be the end of that story. New beginning, fresh start. All those things people say when they're trying to convince themselves they're fine. She smiled bitterly. And I was fine. Or I was getting there. And then you showed up. I'm sorry. I said don't interrupt. But her voice was gentle. You showed up, and at first I was furious, because you had no right to disrupt the life I was building. But then the fire happened, and you went in after me, and I couldn't reconcile that with the man who'd ignored me for 10 years. people can change. Can they? Really? Because I've spent a lot of time wondering if people actually change or if they just get better at pretending. I don't know, but I know I'm trying. I can see that. These past few weeks, the way you've been here without demanding anything, without expecting praise or gratitude, that's new. And it scares me. Why? Because it's easier to hate you when you're distant and cold, when you're human, when you're trying. It's harder. And I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you. I don't know if I even can. The words hurt. But they were true. And he was learning to sit with true things even when they stung. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. I'm asking for a chance to build something different, something real. What if I can't give you that? Then you can't, and I'll have to live with it. She reached for his hand. He took it, careful not to squeeze too hard. The month's almost up, she said. I know. I haven't decided yet what I want. That's all right. Is it? You've been here almost a month living in a terrible room, working yourself half to death, putting your entire life on hold. And I still can't tell you whether it matters. It matters, he said firmly. Whether you choose me or not, it matters. Because I'm not the same person I was when I got here. And that's worth something even if it's not worth you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. That's not fair. What's not fair? Saying things like that, making me want to believe you. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing, just... She pulled her hand back, wiped her face roughly. I need time, real time. Not this forced deadline I set because I was angry and scared. His heart sank. How much time? I don't know, but I can't make this decision while I'm trapped in this bed. I need to be able to walk, to move, to think clearly without pain medicine fogging everything. That could be weeks. I know. And you want me to... What? Keep waiting? If you're willing. He wanted to argue, wanted to push, wanted some kind of certainty because the not knowing was killing him. But he'd spent 10 years prioritizing his own comfort over her needs, and he wasn't going to make that mistake again. All right, he said. I'll wait. The relief on her face was immediate. Thank you. But I need something from you too. She tensed. What? Talk to me. Really talk. About what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Don't just shut me out because it's easier. If you're angry, tell me. If you're scared, tell me. Give me a chance to actually know you. She considered this. That goes both ways. Fair enough. And if I ask you to leave, I'll leave. But until then, I stay. She nodded slowly. Deal. The next weeks were harder than the first month had been. Alara started physical therapy with the healer. Painful, frustrating work that left her exhausted and short-tempered. Rowan helped when she let him, backed off when she needed space, and tried to navigate the impossible balance between being present and being suffocating. They talked. Really talked. In a way they never had during their marriage. She told him about her childhood, about a father who'd died when she was young and a mother who'd remarried badly, leaving Alara to fend for herself in a household that didn't want her. About feeling like a burden for most of her life, always trying to be small and quiet and unobtrusive so people wouldn't resent her presence. That's why the cottage mattered so much, she said one night. It was the first place that was mine, where I didn't have to apologize for existing. I made you feel that way at Blackthorn. Yes. The honesty of it gutted him. I'm sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo 10 years of feeling invisible. No, it doesn't. He leaned forward. What would it take to make you feel seen? She thought about it. I don't know if there's one thing. It's more... She struggled for words. It's about showing up, consistently. Not just when it's dramatic or important, but in the small moments. Remembering what I said, asking questions, caring about the answers. I can do that. Can you? When we're back at Blackthorn with all the obligations and expectations? When there are 100 other things demanding your attention? I don't know. But I want to try. She studied him. What if we didn't go back? He blinked. What? To Blackthorn. What if we just didn't? We can't just abandon the estate. Why not? You have stewards, managers, people who actually know what they're doing. You said yourself Garrett's running things fine without you. But it's my responsibility. Is it? Or is it just what you think you're supposed to do because that's what your father did And his father, before him? The question landed like a blow. Because she was right. He'd never questioned it. The assumption that he'd live at Blackthorn, manage the estate, fulfill the role he'd been born into. It had never occurred to him that he could just choose something else. What would we do? He asked. I don't know. Build something smaller, somewhere quiet, actually talk to each other instead of existing in parallel lives. You're serious? I think so. Maybe. I don't know. She laughed. I'm still figuring out what I want, but I know I don't want to go back to being the Duchess of Blackthorn if it means going back to being invisible. You wouldn't be. I wouldn't let that happen. You can't promise that. Not really, because you don't know who you'll be when you're back in that environment. Neither of us do. She was right again. And it terrified him, because what if she was right about everything? What if the person he was becoming here, the one who actually noticed things and tried and gave a damn, what if that person couldn't survive Blackthorn? I need to think about this, he said. So do I. They sat in silence, the weight of the conversation settling over them like snow. Spring came slowly to the north. Ice melted, snow receded. The moors turned from white to brown to the first tentative green. And Alara started walking again. Tentatively at first, just a few steps with the healer supporting her, her face tight with concentration. Then more, down the hallway, down the stairs. Around the inn's small courtyard. Rowan watched her relearn how to move, saw the frustration when her leg wouldn't cooperate, the triumph when she made it a little farther than the day before. He wanted to help, but knew better than to offer. She needed to do this herself. I'm going to the ruins today, she said one morning, of the cottage. Do you want company? No. I need to do this alone. He didn't argue, just watched her leave, moving carefully but steadily, and tried not to worry. She was gone for hours. When she came back, her eyes were red, but her expression was calm. I'm ready to talk, she said. They walked to the edge of the village where the land opened up to the moors. The wind was cold but not brutal. The sky was that particular shade of gray that meant rain later but clear for now. I've been thinking about what you said, Alara began, about building something different, and I've been thinking about what I want, really want, not what I think I should want or what would be practical. And I want to matter, to myself first, to feel like my life is mine, not something I'm living for someone else's benefit. She looked at him. Can you give me that? I can try. But you're right. I don't know who I'll be at Blackthorn. The weight of that place, the expectations. I'm not sure I'm strong enough to resist them. Then don't go back. It's not that simple. Why not? Because he stopped. Why not? Because it was his duty? Because people were counting on him? Because he'd been raised to believe that walking away from responsibility was the ultimate failure? But what about his responsibility to Alara? To himself? To the life they could build if they were brave enough to try? You're right, he said slowly. It is that simple. I just don't want it to be. Why? Because choosing you, choosing us, over everything else feels selfish. Is it? Or is it just finally choosing something real instead of something expected? He looked out over the moors, tried to imagine it. A life here or somewhere like here, small and quiet and real. No titles, no obligations, just two people figuring out how to be together. It sounded terrifying. It sounded perfect. What would we do? He asked. For money, for purpose. I can't just exist in a vacuum. You could breed horses. You said you wanted to. That's not enough to... Why not? You have enough money to buy land, build stables, start small. I could teach. Really teach. Not just help the vicar's daughter in spare moments. We could build something. Together. You've thought about this. I've had a lot of time to think. He turned to face her. If we do this, if I walk away from Blackthorn, there's no going back. Society will crucify us. My family will disown me. We'll lose everything that title provides. I know. And you're willing to risk that? I already did. When I left. She stepped closer. The question is whether you are. Was he? Was he willing to throw away everything he'd been raised to value for a chance at something real? To disappoint everyone who'd ever expected anything from him in exchange for the possibility of not disappointing the one person who actually mattered? I need to go back, he said. To Blackthorn. One last time, to settle things properly. Make sure the estate's provided for. Make sure people won't suffer because I walked away. Her face fell. You're choosing the estate. No, I'm choosing you, but I'm doing it the right way. Not running away, but making a conscious choice. Handing over control to people who'll do a better job than I ever did. Closing that chapter properly so it doesn't haunt us. She searched his face. You mean it?
Yes. When will you go? As soon as you're well enough to come with me. She blinked. What? I'm not making the same mistake twice. I'm not leaving you behind while I go handle things. We do this together or not at all. Rowan, I mean it. If we're building a life together, it starts now. Not after I've handled the messy parts, now. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You're serious? Completely.
She laughed through the tears. You're asking me to go back to the one place I swore I'd never return to. I know, and if you can't, if it's too much, I understand. I'll go alone and come back, but I'm asking anyway because I don't want to do any of this without you anymore. She wiped her face. This is insane. Probably. We're going to regret it. Maybe. Everyone will think we've lost our minds. Almost certainly. She looked at him, really looked, the way she had that first day when she'd told him his 5 minutes were up and he needed to leave. But this time what she saw seemed to satisfy something. All right, she said, we'll go together. Yeah? Yeah. She took his hand. But I have conditions. Name them. We leave within the month. We stay at Blackthorn only as long as it takes to settle things. No getting sucked back into the social obligations and expectations. And when we leave for good. No just for the season or just for this event. We're done with that life. Agreed. And we do this as partners. You don't make decisions without me. I don't disappear into the background. We figure things out together. Yes. And if it doesn't work, if we get there and realize we can't do this, we're honest about it. No more suffering in silence. Deal. She squeezed his hand. I can't believe I'm agreeing to this. Neither can I. They stood there on the edge of the moors, the wind pulling at their clothes, and for the first time in 10 years, Rowan felt like they were actually facing the same direction. The journey south took a week. Alara's leg was still healing, so they traveled slowly, stopping frequently. Hamish drove with the same stoic patience he'd shown throughout this entire bizarre situation, and if he had opinions about the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn planning to abandon their estate for parts unknown, he kept them to himself. Alara grew quieter the closer they got to Blackthorn. Rowan watched her withdraw, saw the walls going up, and understood. This place had nearly destroyed her. Coming back was brave in a way that running into burning buildings wasn't. We don't have to do this, he said the night before they were due to arrive. I can handle it alone. No. I need to face it. Need to prove to myself that it doesn't have power over me anymore. And if it does, then we deal with it together. The estate looked exactly the same. Same cold stones, same perfect gardens, same sense of oppressive grandeur that had nothing to do with welcome and everything to do with intimidation. Rowan felt it immediately, the weight of expectation settling back over his shoulders like a cloak he'd forgotten he was wearing. The urge to straighten his spine, smooth his expression, become the Duke instead of just Rowan. He glanced at Alara. She was pale but steady, looking at the house like it was a problem to be solved rather than a prison to be escaped. Ready? He asked. No, but let's do it anyway. The servants were lined up to greet them, standard protocol for the Duke's return, but their faces showed shock when they saw Alara. Mrs. Brennan's eyes went wide. Garrett actually stepped back. Your Grace, the steward said. We weren't expecting. The Duchess, Rowan finished. Yes, we're both here. Is that a problem? No, of course not, Your Grace. It's just... Garrett floundered. We'll prepare the Duchess's chambers immediately. One set of chambers, Alara said quietly. We'll share. The shock on the servants' faces would have been funny under other circumstances, but Rowan just nodded. You heard the Duchess. And please gather the senior staff. We need to have a meeting. Within an hour, they were assembled in the library. Garrett, Mrs. Brennan, the land steward, the head groom, and various other key staff. They looked nervous, confused. like the world had shifted under their feet. Good, Rowan thought. It had. Thank you all for coming, he began. I know this is unusual, but the Duchess and I have some announcements to make, and we wanted you to hear them directly from us. He glanced at Alara. She nodded. I'm stepping down as Duke, he said, effective immediately. The room erupted. Your Grace, you can't. That's not possible. The family, the title. I can, and I am. His voice cut through the chaos. The title will pass to my cousin Edmund. He's young, but capable, and he'll have all of you to guide him. The estate will continue. It just won't be my responsibility anymore. But why? Mrs. Brennan asked, and there was real